the front lines in eastern Ukraine, fierce and relentless fighting is raging in and around the city of Bakhmut. That's where Russian forces are now eyeing further advances as they edge towards the centre of the city from three sides. This video, posted on social media, shows some of the damage left by the ongoing battle. It's unclear how many Ukrainian forces are still inside the city, but officials say troops are launching counterattacks to try to preserve their access to Bakhmut from the west. Meanwhile, the US is warning there will be real costs for China if the country were to provide Russia with lethal aid to be used in its war on Ukraine. That comes after the CIA director said the US is confident Beijing is considering sending such aid, but that a final decision hasn't yet been made. The US National Security Advisor weighed in.
Beijing will have to make its own decisions about how it proceeds, whether it provides military assistance. But if it goes down that road, it will come at real cost to China. And I think China's leaders are weighing that as they make their decisions. We will watch carefully, we will be vigilant, and we will continue to send a strong message that we believe that sending military aid to Russia at this time, when they are using their weapons to bombard cities, kill civilians, and commit atrocities, would be a bad mistake, and China should want no part of it.
So there's Claire Sebastian following developments for us, joining me here in London. It would change the entire dynamic of this conflict, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's why you see this effort from the US to talk about it publicly, multiple officials coming out. First, we had Antony Blinken about 10 days ago. He, according to Jake Sullivan, laid out those potential consequences in his meeting with Chinese top diplomat Wang Yi. We don't know what those consequences are. I think it's safe to assume there would be economic consequences, sanctions and things like that. And the US clearly making the point that this would be a red line. I think they hope that this will be a deterrent, that they won't have to get to the point of enforcing those consequences. And, you know, we have to be really clear about what they're saying here, because the CIA director was out on Sunday as well on CBS, and he said, look, we're confident, these are his words, that the Chinese leadership is considering the provision of lethal equipment. They don't know that they have concrete plans. There certainly hasn't been a decision. There hasn't been any shipment, he said, as of yet, but they are confident. They are considering it, so they're trying to get out ahead of this. And obviously, if China does make the decision, it would come at a time when the US believes that Russia has overestimated its ability on the battlefield. Take a listen to a little bit more of Bill Burns.
I think Putin is right now entirely too confident of his ability to wear down Ukraine, to grind away, and that's what he's giving every evidence that he's determined to do right now. At some point, he's going to have to face up to increasing costs as well. In coffins coming home to some of the poorest parts of Russia. There's a cumulative economic damage to Russia as well. Huge reputational damage. It's not exactly been a great advertisement for Russian arms sales. Right. So this is going to build over time. But right now, the honest answer, I think, Putin is quite determined.
Quite determined, and Bill Burns, Max, also pointed out that Russia's military ties with Iran are, in his words, moving at a pretty fast clip. So clearly they're trying to avoid the same thing happening with China, because that could turn the tide on the battlefield and be a very dangerous situation for Ukraine.
How much? I guess it depends what sort of weapons they receive, but you know, we keep hearing these reports, say, running out of different types of weaponry, and the soldiers are exhausted, and so many are dying. How much difference would that support from China make, do you think?
I think it would make a major difference. China has a major weapons industry of its own. The intelligence that our Washington colleagues have reported on before this is that it was ammunition and drones that China was considering sending, not sort of larger scale artillery and things like that. But that is really the front end of the issue at the moment, because of the type of fighting that we're seeing in the Donbass, really heavy expenditure of ammunition. Drones are heavily in use. We've seen them overnight attacking, in particular, the Kyiv region. Ukraine has shot down most of them, but these are the sort of more disposable elements of weaponry that Russia is burning through at an incredibly fast rate. It's really sort of reset the expectations of the military-industrial complex on the side of Ukraine in terms of the transatlantic alliance, and we know that Russia has been looking to Iran and are now looking potentially at China.
Okay, Claire, thank you.
Overnight, Ukrainian forces shot down 11 Russian attack drones, including 9 in the airspace around Kyiv. At least 2 people have been killed and 4 others injured in a drone attack in Khmelnytskyi, a city that's about 200 miles southwest of Kyiv. These attacks are coming as President Zelensky said in recent days he does still believe Ukraine can win the war this year as long as its allies remain united in continuing delivering weapons to Ukraine. CNN's Alex Marquardt is live in eastern Ukraine on the ground tracking these attacks. Alex, what are we seeing that's happening overnight and on the ground?
Well, good morning, Caitlin. Well, these 14 drones were these Iranian-made kamikaze drones that were flown at 2 different cities in Ukraine overnight. Khmelnytsky, which you mentioned, that's where at least 2 people died in a so-called double tap attack. They were first responders responding to another drone strike. When they were killed, 3 others were injured. 11 of these drones were fired at Kyiv, at least 9 of them shot down by air defenses. But the sirens wailed for some 5.5 hours because this was a multi-wave attack. That is not normal. Normally, these sirens go for a couple minutes, then are turned off. And it really speaks to the fact that in cities like this, where people are living relatively normal lives, they live under constant fear of these attacks. And it really does highlight the major security concerns around President Biden's trip to Kyiv last Monday.
Yeah, and of course, the fact that those are the Iranian-made drones comes as we're having the broader discussion about maybe China potentially providing weapons to Russia. Also, Alex, we're hearing from Republican lawmakers who are being very critical of the White House because they have not sent the F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. President Biden actually weighed in on this to ABC News, and this is what he said about the idea of sending them.
President Zelensky continues to say what he really needs are F-16s. Will you send F-16s?
Look, we're sending him what our seasoned military thinks he needs now. He needs tanks, he needs artillery, he needs air defense, including another HIMARS. There's things he needs now.
You don't think he needs F-16s now?
No, he doesn't need F-16s now.
Alex, that's just something that Ukrainian officials flatly disagree with.
This is kind of like the debate over tanks, Caitlin, where the U.S. said that Ukraine doesn't need M1 Abrams tanks, but they decided to give them to Ukraine in the end so that the Germans would release those Leopard 2 tanks. The U.S. standing firmly behind that line of President Biden that right now in this fight, Ukraine does not need fighter jets. That right now the priority should be on artillery, on longer-range rockets, on tanks. That fighter jets are not necessary for this fight. They're not ideologically opposed to sending fighter jets. In fact, I've been told that it wouldn't bother them if other countries sent their fighter jets. But right now, the U.S. priority is on the ground fighting. That is the priority, getting them stuff very quickly. And we are starting to see those shipments coming in. A major sticking point right now is over the ATACMS. Caitlin, as you know, those are the longer range rockets that fly some 200 miles or 300 kilometers. Ukrainians saying they need those right now to hit Russian targets, to hit command posts, to hit ammunitions depots, supply lines, targets in Crimea. The U.S. has only sent rockets that go as far as 100 miles or 150 kilometers because there is a real American fear about provocation, about the fact that Russia would see those longer-range rockets as an escalation. Now, Ukraine, of course, disagrees. So that is a major sticking point between the U.S. and Ukraine. Caitlin?
Yeah, certainly a point of contention. Alex Marquardt, thank you.